In 2132, space traveling is commonplace, and the company Ambercop sends out ships to mine other planets and capture alien creatures to bring back to Earth as a food source. There's a legend that talks about white space, a place where supposedly a person can get cleansed of all their impurities. It has no disease and no suffering, only clarity. To this day nobody has reached this place because it's protected by a giant creature known as Ten Lung. One day two space hunters manage to find Ten Lung. Captain Bentley opens fire, but Ten Lung's mate blocks the shot with her scales. Hawthorne comes out wearing a special suit and aims at the mate's weak spot on her neck, managing to kill her. This enrages Ten Lung, who starts chasing after Hawthorne while Bentley gets ready to attack again. However, his shot misses and he loses control of the ship as a bright light suddenly shines behind it. Then Ten Lung attacks the ship, blowing it up and killing Bentley. 24 years later, Lynn lands her bike outside a restaurant but can't go inside because there's a guard at the door. She works for the ICE, or Interstellar Conservation Enforcement. Inside the building, Bentley's son Richard is having a meeting with a shady businessman, who keeps a creature known as Crazy Bug inside a glass. This man has a map with all the locations where Ten Lung has been seen through the years and offers a juicy reward for the creature's body. At that moment the guard comes in to tell them they're being watched by the ICE and the businessman thinks Richard has set them up. The guard grabs Richard by the neck and the businessman tries to insert the bug in his ear, but Richard knocks it off his hand. Then he grabs a fork and gets the guard off by stabbing him. Another guard comes after him and manages to kick him, but he knocks her out with a vase. The businessman breaks a chair on Richard's back and hits him a few times until Richard tackles him down. They land on a table and Richard starts beating the businessman up, who breaks a bottle and tries to stab him with it. Seeing the bug nearby, Richard pushes the man's face down and the bug enters through his nose, keeping him down by causing great pain. A third guard tries opening fire but now Richard can just grab the map and leave. Seeing this, Lynn leaves as well. 3 months later Lynn is getting ready to work undercover in the Essex spaceship. Her agent records have been wiped clean, and now she must pretend to be a mining and fishing escort with a supply order. After she leaves, her co-workers discuss Lynn's belief that she'll be cured by the white space. Moments later Lynn boards the Essex and meets the captain, who happens to be Richard. His brother Owen gives her a tour of the ship and introduces her to all the crew including the cook Batali, who tells Lynn to stay away from her boyfriend Harpo. In the kitchen there's an old cryopod that is now used as a fridge. A now old Hawthorne is also part of the crew and he became a drunkard after losing Bentley. Afterward Lynn stays in her room and works with her own personal computer. Her profile appears first, revealing she has a tumor and only 6 months to live. Next she checks the intel her boss sent her and learns every single crew member has a criminal past, so she must be careful. Sometime later Hawthorne, Harpo, and Owen put on the special suits and go out to hunt some creatures known as clickers. Lynn asks questions during the whole process, which Richard finds weird because fishing escorts should know these things. The trio waves a rock that the clickers love and the small ones immediately follow it into the container. The big clicker refuses to go in and floats away when the men shoot it. Owen breaks formation and flies after it, ignoring the scolding from the others. The big clicker enters an asteroid and Owen takes a different tunnel to meet it ahead, but at that moment a white light shines very brightly for a few seconds and knocks him out. Soon something very big appears on the radar, so Harpo and Hawthorne hurry to push the container into the ship. Richard shoots a harpoon that connects to the asteroid so when Owen wakes up he can hold onto it. As he moves around, he accidentally hits his head and he starts moving slowly. To his surprise Ten Lung appears nearby, so Owen shoots a tracker that gets stuck on the beast's scales. The whole crew watches the beast fly away before reeling Owen back into the ship. Meanwhile Ten Lung disappears into the bright light. Later during dinner Lynn shares the story of a ship that disappeared while tracking down Ten Lung, and she theorizes it found the white space. If there are black holes that can be entered, she thinks the white ones are the exit. The crew laughs because they think the white space is a fairy tale, so Lynn shares an alternate theory. Since the clickers are supposed to follow Ten Lung, following the tracker Owen through could double their fishing load. However, Richard says they've been fishing for months and it's time to go home. After dinner, it's revealed that Harpo is cheating on Batali with the pilot Ragsland. Once they're done Harpo goes to see Richard, saying he would like to go for the extra fishing Lynn mentioned because he needs the money. Richard explains he doesn't want Lynn constantly looking over their shoulders, so they'll finish this order and drop her off first, then they can go after the big load. Meanwhile Lynn sneaks into the comms room and sends a message to the ICE without noticing her transmission gets intercepted. A few hours later Richard watches a recording from Bentley talking about Ten Lung and remembers the day his father gifted him a sword. He's interrupted by Ragsland on the radio, who tells him 2 small unidentified ships are approaching. Richard runs to the cockpit and tells Ragsland to fly away to lose them, however the ships quickly block their way. Realizing these are pirates, they have no choice but to receive them before anyone gets hurt. The crew makes Ragsland and Batali hide in a secret compartment while Richard puts a beacon on the cargo. He also makes everyone hide their weapons to hopefully avoid a confrontation. When the pirates come aboard, they immediately notice Lynn and start harassing her. Owen tries to defend her, but there's only a short struggle before he gets his leg slashed by a knife and the pirate captain pushes Lynn against the wall. She starts mentioning all the penal codes he's breaking and he gets suspicious, so he checks under her shirt, finding her badge. The pirates steal all the cargo and supplies. They also put a tracker on the Essex before leaving. The crew angrily scolds Lynn because they realized her reports must have gotten the pirates' attention, and a furious Richard orders Harpo to lock her up in her room. Afterward, the crew discusses what to do since they only have 2 small bags of food left. The chances of finishing the fishing order are low without supplies, but they can't return empty-handed. Richard proposes following Lynn's idea and going after Ten Long, whose head would get them enough money for early retirement. They agree to do it, but first they should at least catch a few clickers for food. Moments later, Owen checks on Lynn and asks her why she's there, so Lynn explains she's been trying to find Ten Long, and the only ship that follows the creature's course is the Essex. This makes Owen realize that Richard has been following Ten Long all along and goes to confront him, causing Richard to admit he wants revenge for their father. Owen is furious because he feels Richard is using the crew for his personal quest and nobody consented to this. Suddenly the ship's front window is hit by a substance known as ambergris, which is very valuable. Richard thinks that Ten Long is leaving a trail, but Owen calls it bait. In the meantime, Harpo and Raglan get dirty again. After they're done, Batali finds Raglan's bra. Afterward, the guys go out in the special suits to gather the ambergris and capture a very big clicker. While they're working, the pirates show up to steal this as well, and Richard curses because he realizes they found his beacon. They need the hyperdrive to escape, but the crew discovers the pirates broke that as well. The mechanic Stubbs starts working on fixing it and Richard tells the crew to get back on the ship, but Harpo still chooses to stay to capture the clicker first. Soon the pirates open fire, and while the Essex has a protective force field, it won't last for long. Richard orders Raglan to release the waste chambers, not caring that Harpo is still outside since it was his choice. Harpo moves fast to dodge the chambers and manages to return to the Essex with the clicker he caught. The chambers crash against one of the pirate ships, but the other is still going. When the pirate captain shoots missiles that could destroy the Essex, Stubbs finally finishes fixing the system and the ship disappears by using hyperspeed. Once they're safe, the crew calls Richard out for getting rid of their beacon. Harpo is particularly furious, and when Richard points out he ignored orders, Harpo says he saved everyone's lives by getting food. Richard responds by pushing him, and Hawthorne has to get between them to stop things from escalating. Meanwhile, Stubbs is cleaning the ambergris from the suits when he notices that the lock on the clicker crate is open. When he's about to close it, he notices tiny bugs running on his hand and biting him. Soon the creatures are sneaking under his clothes and he goes crazy trying to get them off, causing him to forget that the crate is still unlocked. Stubbs runs to the bathroom to try to wash the bugs off, however they're now inside his body. When he returns to his room, he keeps hearing voices and starts screaming at the walls. After dinner, Batali tells Harpo that she's pregnant. Harpo freaks out because kids are expensive, so he decides to steal some of the ambergris and hides it in the fridge. Meanwhile, Richard checks on Lynn, who is against killing Ten Long. However, she refuses to explain why, so Richard ignores her argument. After he leaves, Lynn messes with the lock until she manages to break it and finally escapes her room. In the shadows of the corridor, someone is breaking the oxygen reserves. Lynn tries to sneak around quietly, but she's found by Harpo, who grabs her from behind. She immediately starts fighting him and easily overpowers him, thanks to her agent training. At that moment, Stubbs sees all this and runs away screaming, distracting Lynn. This allows Harpo to knock her out with a tool. When she wakes up, she's locked up in the cargo bay and hears Harpo telling Richard that she was the one breaking the oxygen reserves. In the cockpit, Raglan is asleep and doesn't notice the signal that appears on the screen. By the time she wakes up, it's already gone. Batali brings some food to Lynn, who offers her a way to escape safely, but Batali isn't interested. After Batali leaves, Lynn hears the clicker screeching in its crate at the same time that Raglan and Richard hear a weird noise echoing around them. They check the scanner and discover dozens of destroyed ships around the Essex, probably the work of Ten Long. In the vents, Stubbs crawls around while carving soap with a knife. Sometime later, Richard tells Hawthorne it was Harpo who tampered with the oxygen. Hawthorne points out sometimes people do crazy things if they're desperate, implying that Richard may have let the pirates rob them on purpose as part of his plan to catch Ten Long. Richard ignores the implication and mentions Stubbs has to fix the oxygen, but nobody can find him. In the cargo bay, the clicker has escaped the crate and is trying to attack Lynn, who keeps throwing boxes to slow it down while yelling for help. Luckily, Richard hears her and opens the door, getting her out before attacking the clicker with a fire extinguisher. This does nothing and the clicker comes out to start chasing the duo down the corridor. Hitting it with the extinguisher is also ineffective, so Richard and Lynn run away and hide in the airlock. The clicker is fast enough to catch up to them and grabs Lynn's leg, but at that moment Richard releases a crate that lands on top of the clicker, crushing it to death. Afterward, Owen refuses to lock Lynn up again and Richard tells him she'll be his responsibility. An argument ensues and Owen accuses Richard of being as bad as their father, who abandoned the family to go looking for Ten Long. A furious Richard pushes Owen against the wall and says his brother is nothing like their father, as if it was an insult. Owen decides to go to the comms room and sends out a message asking for help, which is intercepted by the pirates again. Meanwhile, Harpo and Raglan are doing the naughty again. He wants to go home and tries to get her on his side, but Raglan refuses to betray Richard. Minutes later, Richard sees the white hole and Ten Lung appears nearby, hitting the Essex with his mighty body. This makes everyone fall and leaves the force field at 50% strength. Then Owen puts on the suit and goes out to hunt Ten Lung, so Richard orders Hawthorne and Harpo to join him. Owen flies around while dodging the beast's attacks, hoping to guide it toward an asteroid belt. He shoots a rope at the nearest asteroid and uses the momentum to fly around it in a circle, which sends him right to Ten Lung's back. As he opens fire, the creature bends his body to push him off. Hawthorne flies closer to try to get Owen back in formation, but Owen ignores him and Hawthorne is struck by the creature. Soon Owen opens fire again, only for Ten Lung to strike him as well, sending him into a tailspin. Owen ends up crashing against an asteroid and a severe hit to the head leaves him heavily bleeding. He apologizes to Richard for failing, but an uncaring Richard just keeps yelling at his men to move so he can shoot his harpoon. At that moment, Lin turns off his aiming system and Richard responds by knocking her out with a punch. Outside, Ten Lung grabs Owen and crushes him into pieces, then Ten Lung activates the bright light to disappear. Moments later, Harpo talks to Raglan in secret, saying that Richard has gone too far and pointing out that the oxygen levels are low. Raglan starts considering mutiny as their only answer. When Lin wakes up, Richard explains they've reached the spot where Bentley died. He had hoped he would feel closer to his father, but instead he lost his brother. He wants to go back to Earth because the low oxygen means no more exploring, yet Lin insists on finding Stubbs to fix it. While going down the corridor, the group hears noises in the vents. Suddenly some nasty goo falls on the floor and Lin notices the parasites in it, so she guesses Stubbs is infected. She thinks there's a chance she could help him, but she needs a way to defend herself. Richard decides to give her his sword and Lin accepts it with a condition. If she helps Stubbs, they'll keep on following Ten Lung instead of going back. Soon the pirate ship finds them and the white hole opens again, so Ten Lung also joins them. Raglan notices they're heading into a storm and Richard orders her to keep going because the pirates won't follow them there. Suddenly Ten Lung creates some colorful waves that make him disappear and bring down the Essex's power source. The ship slows down and the force field is at 20%. While Raglan looks for an alternative, Ten Lung reappears next to the pirates and damages their ship as well. The pilot starts shooting from the inside while the captain comes out in a shuttle to open fire too. These weapons aren't enough to hurt Ten Lung, who moves quickly to destroy both ships before disappearing into another white hole. In the Essex, navigation goes down, so Raglan has to try to override the AI to go manual. In Harpo's room, he tries to tell Batali of his mutiny plan, but she refuses to work with Raglan. He has to remind her neither of them can pilot a ship, so they need her to escape and they agree to work together for the baby's sake. Meanwhile, Richard goes to check on the ship's power source and discovers Stubbs damaged it too. At that moment, Ted Lung appears and throws the destroyed pirated ship at the Essex, causing even more damage. Raglan activates the thrusters and makes the Essex enter the storm to try to lose the beast. As the pirate ship continues to roll on top of the Essex, Richard finishes fixing the power source and now the vessel can go fast enough to avoid trouble. In a dark corridor, Lin finds Stubbs and starts fighting him. In just a few moves she manages to cut his hand off, so he runs away. He hides in the tool closet and uses a torch to close his wound. Minutes later, Raglan finishes taking a bath and grabs her clothes from the locker, only to find the carved soap. Suddenly Stubbs pushes her against the lockers and stabs her with a knife. Then he goes to the kitchen to try to attack Batali, who defends herself with a pot. Unfortunately, he quickly recovers and corners Batali, who tells him about the baby. Her pleas are ignored and she gets stabbed too. Lin runs in and tries to attack him, but Stubbs kicks her down. Batali uses the distraction to hit him with the pot, and when he turns around, Lin decapitates him with the sword. At the same time, Batali falls dead. In the cockpit, Richard and Hawthorne find Ten Lung's signal again, so Richard runs to get in a suit to go out, which saves him from Harpo's plan to attack him. Once outside, Richard opens fire to get Ten Lung's attention and now the creature is chasing after him. He flies near the ship and Hawthorne has a clear view to shoot the harpoon, which perfectly locks Ten Lung down. Unfortunately, the ship's systems are still failing and the AI raises the alarm, telling the crew to evacuate. Hawthorne tries to reach the escape pod, but he's blocked by Harpo, who wants the pod to escape with his girlfriend. A fight ensues and Hawthorne shows impressive moves for his age, but Harpo is still stronger and beats him up. When Harpo is about to kill him, Hawthorne presses a button to activate his suit, which fires a harpoon that instantly kills Harpo. Meanwhile, Ten Lung keeps chasing after Richard by flying around the Essex, causing more damage every time his body comes too close to the ship. Richard insists on trying to kill him, but Ten Lung eventually catches him and crushes him. By the time Hawthorne comes out in his suit, he can only watch in shock how Ten Lung finishes killing Richard and flies right into the Essex to blow it up. Remembering that the fridge used to be a cryopod, Lin hides inside it and activates the freezing sequence. The pod is expelled from the Essex and a sleeping Lin is thrown right into the white hole that Ten Lung opens to leave. At the same time, a rescue ship arrives thanks to Owen's SOS message and rescues Hawthorne. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.